All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in celebration of Pro Bono Week 2021 at this Asia Roundtable, where the discussion is going to be focused on the challenges, experiences, opportunities in Pro Bono or skills-based volunteering, as well as the future of Pro Bono skills-based volunteering practice. Today we have Shalabh Sahai, co-founder and director, iVolunteer India. Hi, Shalabh, great to have you here. We also have Ikuma Saga, founder and CEO, Service Grants Japan. Ikuma-san, welcome and thank you for joining us from Japan. It's great to have you here. All right, so since we don't have a lot of time and we have a lot to discuss, before we go ahead, I just would like to please request everybody to turn your mics off so that we don't have any background sounds. Everyone, please turn your mics off. All right. So Ikuma-san and Shalabh, I think the first question or where we can begin is basically looking at, the experience that each of you have had during the pandemic and any challenges in engaging individuals or companies through skills-based volunteering to support communities or create social impact.
Okay, I start maybe?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Yes. Well, of course, the pandemic affected many parts of the world and many parts of the social sectors or pro bono or in Japan as well. And let me show you two charts. Can I share my screen? Maybe the host. I need to get some permission from the host, I think. Who is the host?
Sachin.
Okay. I got one. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, it is very kind of casual poll we did, but for the newcomer of the pro bono, we asked a question in 2020 last year. And how much has pandemic driven you to participate in pro bono projects? And actually, this 4% and also this 41%. So total 45% of people who newly joined as a pro bono worker answered that the pandemic is a kind of one of the driver to participate in pro bono. But actually, on the other hand, that is it still no? On the other hand, that not much or not at all, 55%. So pandemic is not only the one key driver to drive the pro bono workers to join, but anyway, this is one of the key points. And actually, we experienced that more and more people are interested in pro bono and try to join as a pro bono workers. And so maybe that is partly because they don't have to commute. They get a kind of a extra time so that they can put into the pro bono work. And also they kind of has a kind of distance between the companies or their job, and they think about their life or their community, and that also push their back to come into this social field, I think. And the other side, this is much more serious, and we asked some a question to the local organization around Tokyo, and they answered that the pandemic affected the activity of the organization, and actually 100% every organization has some affection or influence by the pandemic, and actually they are in a very severe situation. How to keep up their activity, how to keep their organization, and still they don't have much like IT technique or things like that. So they had a lot of challenges, and that's the situation, I think.
All right. Thank you, Ikuma-san. I mean, I'm just going to basically jump in here because, folks, I'm moderating the session and I'm also participating as a panelist. So I'm just going to jump in here. And Ikuma-san, I mean, I think it's something that we also saw in India, and I'm sure Shalabh will highlight that further, where we saw the social sector organizations, impacted by what was happening, the pandemic itself. A lot of them had, the ground shift from under their feet completely. They had to let go of their teams. They did not know how to, kind of pivot their programs, because the way India is, a lot of the programming happens in the communities, in the rural areas, across cities, in the slum areas, etc. So there was, that kind of pause on how do we do this? How do we kind of, get together? But there were a lot of social sector organizations who, yes, they had to obviously pause, and there was some kind of a what do you say, assessment of how do we do this and how do we further progress. And therefore, there was again a need at that time too of how do we re-strategize, how do we realign our processes, etc. So that was one standpoint in terms of the social sector organizations. And then what we saw, with our corporate partners, what we basically were seeing that while there were, some of our corporate partners who decided to completely pause their programs, because like we know, global pro bono programs, these traditionally have been in person, where there is an in-person engagement where teams of, employees go directly and work with the social sector organizations in that particular city. So while that couldn't be done, there was a kind of a question of how do we continue supporting social sector organizations in a time of crisis as such, because there was still the need from the social sector organizations to build their capacity, but how do we basically do this? So that was again from the corporate standpoint, but what we saw from our corporate partners was that they did not want to rush in. They also were aware of the fact that every person was impacted on a personal front, right? We all were impacted, employees were impacted. And therefore, what they basically decided to do before they even jumped in or even made any quick decisions about, yes, we should do something, yes, we should continue global pro bono engagement, and how do we do this? Can the employees, engage? Do they have the bandwidth to engage or not? Right. So that was basically the question. And so a lot of the corporate partners ran internal, assessments to figure out if employees, could engage or not. So that was basically what they did. And there was an overwhelming response that came from most of the employees of our corporate partners, where, there was this desire and willingness to support organizations. So that was basically what we also saw. So there was a challenge in pausing. There was a challenge in, gauging if employees were, interested, if they had the bandwidth. But then there was also a realization that people wanted to support people. People wanted to support communities. I mean, to us, the challenge also existed in, the question of how do we do this, right? How do we pivot? But it also gave us the opportunity to reinvent the wheel completely. So, basically looking at moving from the traditional way of working and moving into, exploring opportunities around, how we could maybe tap into technology and then, look at how we could build the effectiveness of these programs on a virtual level. I mean, I'm always going to say that global pro bono engagements, they are key, and they're key to me because, I mean, to me, I feel that these engagements, they shift the lens from, direct services to building resiliency and capacity of the social sector. And therefore, even while the challenges existed, I mean, it is something of value, and it is a very key tool. Shalabh, what about your experiences? Can you share some with us?
Yeah, sure. I think it did kind of show a lot of challenges in different phases, and they changed. So I think the first phase, when the lockdown was on, the digital divide became much more starker, much more visible. because while for corporates and for most of the volunteers imparting pro bono services, it was easy to move on and adopt technology and work from home. The non-profits on the other side, obviously just could not. So I think that was something that we saw in the first, couple of almost like 5 months. Extreme difficulties in kind of getting the non-profit, and especially given the fact that we at least work with the small to medium-sized non-profits. The larger ones might have adopted easily, but the small to medium-sized ones found it much more difficult. And also, if at all the pro bono service was involving beneficiary, for example, then that was even more difficult. So I think that is something that I faced, and that changed over a period of time. The adoption obviously increased over a period of time, but that in the initial stages was the biggest difficulty. The second, and which has been more of a continued challenge again from a non-profit or the pro bono service recipient side, is that the focus was much more on the operational survival of the organization, and not as much on the strategic future or going forward. And if you look at, pro bono basically builds an NGO's, an organization's capacity to kind of, mostly look forward. It does solve some immediate challenges, but it is mostly kind of, going forward. I think because the NGOs themselves were kind of, focused much more on survival of their operations and programs on the ground, on service delivery, and on kind of, engagement with the beneficiaries, keeping staff in line. So I think that's where some of the challenges were much more starker. The other is, I think, like you were saying, Shilpa, a lot of compassion was there in people, because from a volunteering point of view, we saw a peak, almost 8 times the number of volunteer registrations in every month that COVID was actually impacting higher in India. So our website was having 8 times the traffic in each of those months. Last year, May, this year, May. So volunteering intent was going high. But then that compassion is much more linked to the basic volunteering services where you can help somebody in need directly. And the skills-based or pro bono services was not coming at the forefront. So I think volunteering grew tremendously. The intent grew tremendously, but pro bono services were not the immediate thought from the volunteer point of view. So that's the other challenge that we faced, kind of, how to matchmake. And I think the other is that, again, traditional corporate volunteering or traditional volunteering services, they were not also as accustomed to online or virtual volunteering. And therefore, kind of, the same showed it also in their engagements in pro bono manner. So for example, just imagine a simple team. If a team was coming together to help an organization on ground, for the same team to collaborate purely online was also difficult. So I think there are challenges kind of, all around. And even from the corporate perspective as well, like, you were saying, Shilpa, so some of the corporates did take a lead, but mostly again, for them also, the focus was much more on kind of, business, re-innovation or re-engineering to make sure that, the business continues, employees stay together. At the fag end of which, pro bono and voluntary engagement also came, but it was at the fag end. It was not business as usual. So I think those were some of the challenges that we kind of, obviously saw. Shilpa, you're in mute.
Yeah, I mean, just moving on to the next question, and I'm, and also linking back to what you just said, the next, kind of question is on adapting, right? I mean, how did each of us adapt to this challenge that the pandemic brought to surface, right? New practices that materialize as a result of the situation on the ground. And I think that's something that, because of, and I mean, going back to what you said, Shalabh, we had to look very closely at our processes, right? Because we are going from an in-person engagement, and we have to shift that traditional lens and look at how do we continue making this service or this engagement as effective as to basically recreate that similar experience, right, on a virtual platform. So how do we actually do this? And then, looking at how do we continue to make this experience on a virtual level transformative for the employees, the way an in-person engagement is, right? That was one. And the second is basically impactful for the social sector organization, where we don't want the organization to feel that this is not giving them what they want, because the people are not face to face with them on the ground. The conversations are not fluid the way they are. There is not enough interaction or enough opportunities for both sides, to the employees and for the organization, to engage. So how do we basically do this? And these are some of the questions that we had to look at really closely. And then of course there was virtual fatigue. So all of this together is what we had to look at very closely when we looked at reinventing and pivoting our programs. And what we've seen, I mean, in fact, for India itself, we've had teams from from Indian companies from last year to this year. We've had Medtronic, we have had, and I'm talking about India and Asia Pacific. So we've had Medtronic, we've had J&J, we've had MasterCard, we've had JPMC, and all the experiences for these teams. And of course, I mean, I'm just going to say that that in person is that experience, right? It is basically a very different immersive experience. So yes, we cannot replicate completely what an in-person experience is, but most of the teams that as a result of the surveys that we do, at the end of these engagements, close to 90% of the employees felt that they were there and they had done that created impact, and they felt that there was transformation that had happened, and of course the entire feeling of what do you say, the feeling of goodness towards their own companies, and realizing that the companies are out there supporting communities and doing better. So basically that is something that we saw. And also we also saw a shift in terms of the models that we created. So we went from a completely virtual pro bono model, which is basically 6 to 8 weeks. But of course there are companies that cannot do 6 to 8 weeks, and these are people, we had employees who were working in their jobs along with these programs. So it's it was such a difference, because an in-person engagement is they take 2 weeks off from work, right? They're completely immersed. But here we had employees working in their daily jobs, working from home, and committing to this project. And in spite of that, there was, in spite of the balancing that was required, I mean, they did phenomenally. I mean, there were great projects and great outcomes that came out of this experience. So we had our virtual pro bono programming. We had our virtual clinics, which are basically shorter. It's just basically a days of consultative kind of services for the organizations. And then we went into these hackathon challenge type of models, where we had a large number of employees working in teams, competing with each other to create solutions for the social sector organization. So, I mean, a lot has happened, in terms of adaptation. I think that there was some, I mean, the feeling is that, there was this kind of thinking about, okay, before the pandemic happened, that how do we deliver virtually, right? Can this be done? Because we were all immersed in in-person programming. But the pandemic happened, and it pushed us all into the corner. And basically it was like, okay, there is no other way. So now, you have technology. How can you leverage technology to, to your best requirement? And how do you basically make this effective so that the work doesn't stop, the supporting of communities doesn't stop, right? So Ikuma-san, can you tell us how you adapted and what your experience in adapting to this was?
Okay, yeah, well, like you said, Shilpa, of course there are a bunch of stories to do with the kind of virtual activities.
Yeah.
And of course, so like 99% of the activity moved to virtual, and we give orientations or kickoff meetings or everything to the pro bono worker on virtual style. And one interesting thing is there are some of the participants is coming from other part of Japan, or even outside Japan, and
Yeah.
there's so this kind of thing happened. So someone just from Singapore joined in the team of Japan. Maybe she is maybe working in she's Japanese, but she's working in outside Japan, and they can join. And also we gave and the more challenge was there in the non-profit sectors, and we gave training for non-profit organization to use the Zoom or to use some like communication tools for them. And actually they can manage actually some of them. And even the people who are in the age of like 60, 70 or even 80s, they can actually manage. So they have a lot of fear, but when they start, actually it is not very big obstacle actually. And also another adaptation is actually creating a new goal, I think. And that means we used to give like website or brochures or business planning or things like that. And adapting to the situation of pandemic, we try to give them like some new program using the Zoom or using an online platform, and to make their in-person activity to virtual activities, and customization of the non-profit activities in this crisis. So so creating new goal and creating some exploring some possibilities of the pro bono support. And finally, I would like to touch that one of the good point about this adaptation. And I often see that the internal communication inside the team are, I think, better before the pandemic actually, because they can meet very often like 30 minutes per week or things like that. So, and I often see that the team is, I think, getting better and very so thanks to the online tool. So there's some, I mean, good. There are always a good side and bad side, but there can be some good side as well. But actually, I would like to. Sorry, I need to add one point. But well, there's a digital divide. So we are communicating with the organization, the beneficiary who are on the platform or who are with us, but we cannot talk with the outside this kind of platform. So we need to. I mean, the pro bono is coming to be kind of a problem of connecting and or discovering the beneficiaries, and this is the I think our common challenge. I think. Right. Yeah.
Shalabh.
Yes.
Share with us your new practices and how you adapted.
Yeah. In fact, I just want to kind of, I don't know, continue and maybe even counter Ikuma-san in saying that, while the team communication improved tremendously and therefore the work kind of, was more better coordinated. But like yesterday, I was in Mumbai and I was meeting my team, all members of our team in Mumbai were actually meeting after 1.5 years. So seeing each other face to face after 1.5 years. And we realized that the personal connect that, is there is lost. And that's a downside, because then the motivation and the support that you can depend upon and the inspiration that you seek and the celebration that happens, I think, all of it could not have been, could not move online. So I think that's the gap that we did feel. But thinking of, the adaptations that we have done. So one of the things we realized was because they were NGOs are finding it difficult to begin with to think of, how virtual pro bono projects can be, would be usable for them in this current time. We started thinking of some generic needs that would exist and started checking out if NGOs had those needs. So instead of simply going and asking, we said, okay. So for example, right in the beginning, an NGO's readiness for the digital world, how many of them were capable of kind of, moving their systems online? Were their teams ready? Did they have policies in place about work from home? So those elements, we realize that these are some of the common things that are going to be there, and these are immediate and these are solvable through pro bono intervention. And so that's one way we kind of, tried raising kind of, the awareness and how pro bono could still be impactful in the immediate time. So that's something that we worked on, and which is where we focused more on the survival that is needed, because you need to build, win the confidence of the nonprofits, and then kind of, you can move way forward. So that's one. The second that we had was, we again used, like Ikuma-san was saying, used the virtual to our advantage, and said that, usually the organizations that we work with tend to be in the big cities where we are in. But now we were actually able to extend services to nonprofit organizations in remote locations. So for example, Whiteboard, which is one of our leading pro bono programs, usually consults and advises NGOs on a strategic level in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. But now we were actually able to, experiment and pilot the same program with the same set of advisors sitting in Bangalore and Mumbai, but actually taking on supporting organizations that were in the remote parts of the country. So I think that added on. And then the next level, which is kind of, still working out, is, we have, like Ikuma-san was saying earlier, some of the volunteers who are approaching us to offer pro bono services from places like Dubai or Hong Kong or Singapore, or sometimes even US. Now, I think sometimes with US and Europe, the timing may not work out, but at least the intent is there. Right. But with the other parts in Asia, actually the timing is not a problem. It's only about a difference of 3 hours this way or that way. So I think that, so we started thinking of how can we actually, the teams be more kind of, based on different locations, or individual projects that can be taken up by or pro bono service that can be provided by volunteers from outside of India. So that was another element. And more recently, what we have started doing is, because we realized that the connect of the volunteer with the organization was limited. So we said, why don't we actually get the volunteers to play some bit of role of scoping of projects itself? Now, so that's something that we kind of, start. So we put together a team of volunteers, of tech volunteers, or tech evangelists, as we call them in Bangalore. And we said, we'll allocate you, an organization where you can scope out the projects. Now, it was solving two problems at the same time. One, it was kind of, introducing the volunteers to the nonprofits in a capacity where they had more time to communicate and understand and establish a rapport before they actually get onto a project. And obviously there, so the onboarding and the engagement and the personal touch became much more profound. And the second on the other side was that we were obviously solving a problem where NGOs were unable to define the scoping of projects. Right. So the volunteers themselves were defining it. And then they could hand it over to some other volunteer as well, or they could implement it themselves. So in doing so, kind of, so these are some of the so three things that we focus on. How can we have generic problems for and focus on the immediate problem? Second is go remote both ways, nonprofits and volunteers. And third is how do you increase the engagement beyond the immediate pro bono service between the volunteers, that we don't lose that ground. So yeah.
Okay, so Shalabh, why don't you just continue, and with I think the last segment of this is how do you see the future of the practice?
Okay. So I have kind of over the last month and a half, I have started a bit of travel, not too much. Still working from home. The team is entirely work from home. We can afford that as an organization. But I've started traveling a little bit, and I see that as we step out, life on the street is back to normal. In the communities is back to normal. It's possibly certain corporate offices that continue to kind of work from home. So which means that we have to steadily even get back our regular pro bono services on the ground as well. The demand is coming back, and we have to coming back in a slightly different way. So I think that's we have to just ready to kind of take it on. But the work practices have changed significantly for working professionals and for non-profit professionals. Yeah. So because work practices have changed, we have to think of newer ways of how to offer our services. It will what has changed has changed. I don't think we'll ever get back to the way the world was 2 years back. Right. So we have to kind of continue some of what we are doing. But the other big thing is the virtual challenge that like I was talking, where is the engagement and inspiration? And while a lot of companies were partnering with us initially just to offer volunteer pro bono service, it moved on to pro bono and volunteering as a form of engagement of team members, because obviously people were in their families or in their, so how do you kind of, do that? So clubbing the pro bono experience with the kind of, the in-person engagement between teams and kind of, the community is something that we have to adopt on. It cannot be any longer cut and dry. We know that you can't have people completely compartmentalized. Right. So I think that's something that's a significant change that we might see in the pro bono practice.
Ikuma-san, how do you feel about the future of the practice?
Yes, I really feel quite inspired with the Shalabh's speech, but I think I'm going to touch this kind of similar things, and well, mainly first of all, we have been watching the kind of huge trends, not just because of the pandemic, but also before pandemic. There's a trend of the general tendency for the corporate workers would like more interest towards the social engagement, I think. And so there is a huge need to join as a social sector, but also the social sector has a lot of needs. But so the pro bono is a matter of connecting, and a matter of connecting those two sides. And so our challenge is actually how we build up the power or capacity to connect those both sides, and especially when we experienced the pandemic, we had a again huge gap between two sectors, and now let me again show you one our website here. I'm sorry, this one. How much? Can you see the website? Yeah. So we started this online platform. It's called Grant, and there's like now. Sorry, it's only Japanese, but 30 project is going on, and 69 project has completed. And so now it's about, now 99 projects has completed or matched now. And there's a lot of projects here, and people can just enter like crowdfunding or like a Tapu Plus like system. And we are building this kind of platform. And so the small organization or local organization, even the remote area organization, they can pitch their needs and look for the help by the pro bono. And but our online platform is not enough actually, and I thought that the scoping is also one of the keys to connect those two parts. And so we also started an event called Scopathon, which also kind of originally started by Taproot Foundation. But so now I think the combination of the Scopathon and Grant, the platform, is one of the keys for us to spread the pro bono activities around the countries. And so yeah, so this is one of our kind of strategic tools for from now on. Yeah.
And how long has it been in existence, Ikuma-san, this particular platform?
Yeah, well, we did have some kind of an experimental phase, but it's kind of officially released in like 1 year and a half.
Okay.
1 year and a half. Yeah.
All right, and you're seeing a great outcome from it. I mean, you're seeing more and more people engaging with that platform, and
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Last year, like 25, and now 75. So it's increasing.
Yeah. And so I think I just had like one kind of a question, because I feel like something that Shalabh you touched on also, and Ikuma-san touched on also. I mean, we do have a lot of remote organizations, right? I mean, we know that there's a digital divide, and whether it's Japan, whether it's India, there is this digital divide. I mean, are there any thoughts on, is in-person, is that the only way to, get these smaller organizations that are in these remote rural areas, to get any kind of support? Or, is there, I mean, it's just a question I'm throwing out there, or is there any other way of, basically lending them that support?
Okay, maybe I start with,
yeah, sure.
and you're touching very great point. And we are now starting to connect with the local intermediary organizations. There are like some local intermediary organization who is specialized in that area or in this area. And they have a network with the non-profit organizations around there. And if I can make a connection with them, and they start a grant and scopathon, and they can reach out to the local small organizations. Yeah. That's the idea.
Shalabh, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, very, very pertinent point, So I think so far we're depending upon that even a lot of remote organizations also have professionals who still are far away, but they are conversant in English, they are qualified technically, and they have digital access. So given these three things, we can connect with them, and scoping can work out, and pro bono service and volunteer engagement can work out. I think this is only helping us think that, okay, it's workable. Earlier we were thinking that it is not workable. So I think we've taken another challenge in making it work. But end of the day, they will always be very, very ground-based community organizations that may have one of these elements missing, and it will be difficult to get them on board purely from a distance using technology. So we'll have to figure some way of, a combination of in-person and technology.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I just to kind of round up the discussion, I feel that is one of the futures of pro bono for India. And Ikuma-san, like you said, I think maybe it's also in tapping the local intermediaries, local stakeholders within those communities, the local players actually in those communities, to basically see how we can support these social sector organizations that are working with communities. And then I think a lot of the points that we touched upon are that virtual pro bono is not going away. It's probably here to stay, but at the same time, we are going to see different avatars of engagements. It's going to probably go into a hybrid phase. We might also see the coming back of completely in-person programming. However, what virtual pro bono has done is it's shown us another way of doing this. That it is possible for people to do it from wherever they are sitting, right? They can still lend the support, whether they're providing the support to someone in Japan and they're sitting in another country, or even if there could have been an employee, which we experienced, was there were employees that couldn't travel, right? They couldn't travel because of whatever was happening at home, and so they were not able to participate in in-person engagements. But because of virtual pro bono, they were able to participate in the virtual pro bono engagements and lend the kind of support that they wanted to. So I think that is one. And of course, pro bono engagements are going to continue to provide the kind of opportunity for companies and to address the most critical issues in communities, and to kind of also look at how to address these immediate critical needs, while they also have a tool where they're providing transformative experiences to their employees through this pro bono engagements, and they're also kind of as well as aligning with their business strategy. So I think that all of these things is something that we're going to continue to see in the future of pro bono. But I think what I have kind of also noticed more and more with pro bono as a tool is that it is being leveraged more and more, and it can be leveraged to address systemic issues. And I think that is going to be the next game changer as far as pro bono is concerned. So we're going to end here. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And thank you, Ikuma-san, for joining this discussion at such a short notice. Shalabh, thank you for putting it together at such a short notice. And it's been a great discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ikuma-san, and thank you, Shilpa, for kind of making it happen. And thank you, everybody else, for joining in. I think it's been wonderful. And I definitely also think that, this is the kind of challenge to which pro bono services have to always rise and be ready. And it was thrown to us. We've done a bit, but we have to prepare for the longer run. So yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.